Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of State of Cybercrime. Looks like we've got quite the crew here today. Everybody's chiming in and telling us where they're from. I'll get things
Yeah,
kicked off. Hi, my name is Matt Radelack, and today I'm actually broadcasting from London, England.
and I am David Gibson, broadcasting from not London, England. Um,
Hi, this is Moriah Hara, and as you can tell from my background, I am in Manhattan, so good to see you all. I'm a three-time CISO, and really excited to be here today and talk about a lot of the exciting and scary stuff going on.
Awesome. Thank you. So we are going to go through our usual segments of the show today. We'll start out, as always, with sharing some of the good news and the good happenings in cybersecurity. You used to say we jump on to our newest segment, AI Vey. That'll surely leave you saying AI Vey, which it still will, but it's no longer our newest segment. We'll talk about some vulnerabilities, jump on the highway to the danger zone, as well as have our brand new segment, Voices from the Front Lines, where we showcase CISOs and other people and members of the community as a guest spotlight on State of Cybercrime. So this is new for us, and we're really, really excited to do that. Let's jump on into Is There Any Good News? So for those of you that are joining us for the very first time today, we always like to start out the show with sharing some of the good news and happenings in cybersecurity, as oftentimes when cybersecurity, AI security, data security, it is all doom and gloom. And so I'll start, a former software engineer from Google, Lin Wei Ding, after facing 11 days of trial in a federal court in San Francisco, was convicted by a jury on 7 counts of corporate espionage for stealing data from Google and sharing it with Chinese tech companies. What they stole was over 2,000 pages of confidential material between May of 2022 and April of 2023. How did they steal it? Well, they upload the files to their personal Gmail account. I know, a rather sophisticated exfiltration technique. What was in those files? Well, it contained data on Google's AI supercomputers, their TPU and GPU technologies, and a lot of information about how their orchestration worked on their large AI workloads.
yeah, it seems like it's a little bit of the plumbing, right? It's sort of how are we, how they were running AI, how were they were doing the efficiently, how were they running it more efficiently,
Yeah,
kind
and
of
how the
powering it. Yeah,
computers
yeah.
themselves were built, and
Hmm.
I think when you think of orchestration, that's kind of running everything and joining everything together. The thing that really caught me about this was that they shared it with their personal Gmail. That was the exfiltration technique.
Yes, yes.
I've
Maybe
never
they
heard
should
that one
study.
before. It's like one
Yeah.
of the first times I've ever seen that used in a breach.
Who would have thunk it? Who would have thunk it?
What's up with this Operation Switch Off? I wonder if that's about switching things off, but you'll have to tell us.
Yes, well, in advance of the Olympics, Europol, Eurojust, and Interpol worked together to shut down some illegal IP streaming services with names like IPv Italia, Miglior IPv, Dark TV. In doing this, they identified 31 suspects, took actions in 11 cities and 14 countries. They disrupted the infrastructure that served millions of users that subscribed to these services, including 250 resellers, actually more than 250 resellers, and 100,000 IPTV subscribers in Italy. So servers were also dismantled in other places, Romania and Africa. And I think what's interesting is how they were. I was like, I didn't realize that this kind of piracy was a thing beyond sharing what Netflix passwords. But I guess as streaming services are, becoming more expensive and I don't know, they're hundreds of them that people think we pay for it, that piracy is going to be more of a thing. But these TV services hijack streams of not just the individual accounts, but apparently their commercial accounts, like hotels and things like big kind of aggregators. And then there are other pirating sources that they can pirate from. And then there's also leaked material stuff that comes out in advance of the actual event that they would be able to pirate to. And sometimes they combine the pirated signals with legitimate feeds. But I think the most important thing is cybercrime takedown should be part of the next Olympics in its own event. What do you think of that?
Yeah, it may be in the Winter Olympics though, it's more of an indoor sport than an outdoor one.
On a nice day though, but could be more fun.
Well, we know we have some other interesting things to share. One specifically I wanted to talk about was that security researchers from MiGo, they identified a prompt injection vulnerability inside of Google's ecosystem that exposed sensitive data via Gemini. What happened is a Google invite would get sent that had a dormant payload, and that calendar invite would bypass all the built-in privacy controls. And without direct interaction from the user, the attackers could access private meeting data or even create deceptive calendar invites.
I did you just send an invite for me later to my Google
I
account?
thought I sent it to your personal mail there, David.
This sort of untrusted input in AI, I think, is going to be a theme. But it seems like this is a big issue, right? Is how do we make sure that
Yeah.
our AI is safely chunking what is fed?
And there's a new class of vulnerabilities that we have to test or even design flaws that we have to test these models and, co-pilots and agents for. And I think that's the challenge that people are facing is really like, I need to adopt these things so fast, but even large companies like a Google are still, introducing, what would be considered a top 10 vulnerability in a model, which would be prompt injection or, model poisoning. What's going on
Absolutely.
with Claude Desktop?
Well, if you're running Claude, apparently you can install some extensions on both the web and desktop side. Uh, these extensions can do things like control the Chrome browser, generate a website. You can control Kubernetes, containers, and infrastructure. You can connect to Slack. If you want to see if you're running Claude, you can go to settings and extensions and see if you've got any enabled there. But this is kind of the background. Researchers at Layer X disclosed an RCE zero-click remote code execution vulnerability in the desktop extensions that allows full system compromise without any user interaction. And guess how you could invoke it? A malicious calendar invite. The interesting thing is Anthropic decided this isn't really a flaw and there's nothing to fix. It's I think their position, if I'm understanding it right, is that the functionality that is core to MCP here, yes, it can be abused, but it's functionality that they can't minimize. It's up to kind of the end user to enforce more of these trust boundaries.
And it's really about chaining multiple apps together in this case, right? It's
Yeah.
that it can access your calendar. You let it access your calendar, so you need to accept the risk of things happening to your calendar as a result.
Yeah. So, example, if you've connected your calendar and you're connected your Kubernetes installation with desktop extensions, then some kind of poison in your calendar, that LLM poisoning in your calendar, could invoke instructions to control stuff in your container infrastructure. I think it's that unsanitized input and the ability to do powerful things in the same system that we're starting to see here as people want this functionality. It's really cool, but I think there's quite a bit of risk here.
Few vulnerable vulnerabilities that everyone should be aware of, including, some Microsoft phones. Now, to no surprise, not only are Patch Tuesdays heating up this year and the lists are pretty long, but we've had a couple of out-of-band patch days as well. Recently, Microsoft released an out-of-band security update to patch some actively exploited flaws in Microsoft Office. Two were very notable that I wanted to share with you. One, CVE 2026-21509, which allows unauthenticated attackers who could trick users into interacting with them to exploit and expose data via the preview pane. What this did, this vulnerability bypassed OLE mitigations when a user would open a malicious Office document. Another 0-day to keep on the lookout for 2026-21510. That's an actively exploited vulnerability in Windows Shell where a protection mechanism fails in Smart Screen that allows it to be bypassed and shell security prompts to be run via specifically crafted links or shortcut files without the user having to click through those warnings like, are you sure you want to run this? Again, these both are patched, but were under active exploitation when released by Microsoft. There were others as well, but those were the two most notable ones that I saw from that out of band patch update. What's
It's
going
not
on
just for
with
Tuesdays anymore, is it?
no, you're going to get some, you could have a Microsoft holiday every day. What
Yeah.
about those SolarWinds patches? What's going on there?
Yeah, I seem to remember something about a SolarWinds thing a few years back. Maybe can refresh our memories on that. But
Yeah, it was something with
the
password 123, if I'm remembering it correctly.
Um, but SolarWinds has a web help desk ticketing and asset management solution. Think about it as kind of analogous to some of the stuff that ServiceNow has or VMC Remedy. And think for the CVEs there, there's a bunch of vulnerabilities in the HD server, which is the web help desk server, which is often public facing. So there have been four vulnerabilities here. Two of them are deserialization. Two of them are authentication bypass or authorization bypass, rather. There's also a new one, actually 551. It's actually a new patch for some of the same issues that have been patched previously. So that sort of, can kind of set the hairs on the back of your neck up a little bit. Kind of the same core deserialization vulnerability being, repatched and repatched. There was also another January patch, 40537, that looks like another hard-coded credentials vulnerability. So again, and it looks like there have been some intrusions now that have exploded one or more of these because they came out they're not sure which of them were the primary ones because they were all these intrusions have happened around the same time with infrastructures that were vulnerable to all of those.
Oh,
So once the server is expanded, the same playbook, land and expand. They used like Cloudflare tunnels and Zoho Assist for command and control and persistence. And finally, they captured the flag, and some of the environments got the ntds.dead, right? Did DC sync, some of the standard attacks to kind of take over the whole show.
SolarWinds at it again. Well, let's jump on the
Yes.
highway to the danger zone and talk about a few attacks, breaches, and actor groups that you should be aware of. I need you guys to imagine something for me, though. Okay, it's kind of a worst case scenario. Your organization gets hit by a ransomware as a service gang. You have no choice but to pay the ransom so that you can decrypt the data and regain control of your environment. But guess what? The ransomware is so poorly coded, it's not able to be decrypted. That's the reality that's been faced recently by victims of the Sakari ransomware, a flaw in their key management process where when the malware generates a new RSA key pair on each execution, unfortunately also discards the private key, leaving victims with no path to decryption. What researchers that have sandboxed and reversed this malware think is that it was likely vibe coded or it was coded by AI or AI assisted, which is ultimately what led to this oversight. And as security researchers and regulators are always stating, they really do encourage organizations not to pay the ransoms because you're always at risk of not getting the decryptor not working, or even facing double or triple extortion schemes.
Yeah, I mean, it's so surprising when ransomware actors are untrustworthy, but now incompetent as well. Oh,
Yeah, just imagine you paying the ransom and then not even being able to decrypt it. And what about
yeah.
this cyber espionage campaign? David, what's going on here?
Yeah, so this is about UNC 6619. We don't really know who they are. It looks like it very probably is a large country in Asia. And we don't really know why they're doing these operations. All we know is there's been compromise in at least 70 organizations in 37 countries. A lot of recon against government-linked infrastructure, actually in more 155 countries. So government, energy, telecom, elections. How are they conducting these operations? Phishing is the most common vector in. Then once a user is phished, they make use of 15 or so vulnerabilities to install a beacon, Cobalt Strike or VShell, install the network tunneling tools. One thing that's a little bit scary is they've got a Linux kernel that's an eBPF based rootkit, which is pretty hard to see, and obviously it gives you a ton of control there. The command and control domains are designed to look legitimate. And so this looks like staging. It's like they're banking access to all this infrastructure, and it looks like from the stealth that they were, planning to be there a long time. So that I think one of the things that really got my attention there is the BPF-based rootkit, going after Kubernetes and the infrastructure there. That can be a blind spot for organizations. A lot of east-west traffic flows, a lot of keys going through there. So this one, I'm glad that some of our researchers in the community detected this. Hopefully, we can make sure that we can kind of stop some of this. But I expect we'll see some reports of future exfiltration or
Yeah, especially how
exfiltration.
broad their targets were.
Yeah,
I thought I saw like government agencies, trade commissions, law enforcement, and border control agencies, diplomatic agencies. A lot of geopolitic, election-based, trade policy-based. So like very, very broad scope of targets.
yeah. This is big stuff, kind of scary, and be on the lookout.
Speaking of scary things, in our newest segment, Voices from the Front Lines, which we are debuting live here with you today, we are very excited to bring firsthand perspectives from leaders who live in the realities of data security, AI security, and cybersecurity. Our very first guest is Moriah Hara, a three-time award-winning Fortune 500 CISO who's led security programs at companies like Wells Fargo, Interpublic Group, and the Bank of Montreal, is now a hugely respected voice on AI governance, cybersecurity, and risk management. So please join me in welcoming Moriah to the show. We've got a couple of hot stories, and then we've got some questions to put Moriah in the seat and really share with us her experience. So let's dive into them, David. First and foremost, OpenClaw. So OpenClaw, for those of you that haven't heard about it, that is an open source AI assistant from Google. It's gaining a lot of traction, a lot of noise in the coding community, but it's also being criticized for not quite being secure enough by design. What its critics are really claiming is that their security model, the design of OpenClaw, assumes that the users that are using it have a lot of expertise in security, which they simply don't. What essentially what can happen is that its deployment model is quite dependent on how the user configures it. Surprise, like any SaaS application or cloud that's deployed by any corporation anywhere, it's got vulnerable to prompt injection if if untrusted inputs are allowed to be input. It's got what people call the lethal trifecta, where if you can access private data and process untrusted external content and communicate externally, you're basically a sitting duck for data breach and data exfiltration. It's also got supply chain risks that are built in as the entire registry relies on third-party websites and connections and skills. And there's a lot of autonomy by the agent that doesn't require human approval. To make matters a little bit more complicated, actually uninstalling it if you decide that it's too unsophisticated or not secure enough for you is also a little difficult.
This is I guess we'd love to get Mariah to weigh in on some of this here, but I've been looking at OpenClaw, especially as this story came up, and it really, the tension between productivity and security, I think, has never been clearer, right? The amount of stuff that you can automate, the promise of it, is really amazing. Yeah, read all your chats, all your emails, go, make reservations for you, do all sorts of stuff. But the giving all that unsanitized input, to the same system that can do all this stuff. And then on top of that, you have an app store essentially with Claw, right? There's sort of tools or skills rather. There's kind of a
Yes, and
skills.
by the way, 30% of them are malicious, which made me think, is this some sort of nation state tool to get into all of our prod environments?
Yeah.
30% of the skills
Yeah.
that you can use have malicious prompt injection or backdoors.
Cool. I like Kurt's new name for this. It's called dumpster fire claw.
Love it. I
Yeah,
mean,
that's not bad. We need to make that a somehow make that an Olympic reference though. So you know, 10 points to anyone in the chat that can make an Olympic reference out of that.
And I think you nailed it. I think when, with my clients and the other CISOs I'm talking about, the last 2 weeks, they've been heads down trying to understand what the risk exposure is. And like David mentioned, even if you uninstall it, you still have exposure from data that was accessed, API tokens that are potentially on public web forms. So, this makes me think about there's nothing new under the sun when you think of the early days of Microsoft, when you think of MongoDB. I mean, the want of fast adoption and security later, we've seen it time and time again. Super, super popular, super useful. Let's put security aside. And this goes back to my question. And again, I work with a lot of clients on this, is where's your security architecture process? Like any new tool like this you should already have a process. And I'm seeing a gap in some of the AI tool integration, some of the AI expertise in terms of asking the right questions and capturing it in that life cycle, right? Because we've been doing security now for 20 years. And every company has an architecture review process for any new tool that comes in. Are we asking the right questions? Clearly, we haven't, because this has caught a lot of people. And developers, are a part of this, right? And I know developers aren't necessarily security first champions, but we need to get them on board and understand the larger picture here.
And I really like something that Zen, hopefully I pronounced your last name here, Petrowski said in the chat, which is that people are just putting inherently too much trust into AI. What I've also seen is that like they're like, well, it was, it's from GitHub. Like GitHub's pretty, trustworthy. They build good product. Like, and there's just this inherent like, oh, it's AI. It's got to be great. It's got to be useful. And there is this rush to adopt it. I think another example of that, kind of gone wrong is Moltbook. So Moltbook is launched as a Reddit-style social network for AI agents. It's claiming it's having explosive growth with over 1.5 million bots already collaborating on it. But what investigators found is that it's all manufactured hype. A lot of the viral AI drama posts were actually created by humans using scripts to impersonate agents and sensationalize content to promote their own tools and AI applications. Also, their analysis showed that about 93% of popular posts were traced back to just 17,000 of the 1.5 million users. Another fun fact, the platform relies heavily on OpenClaw AI agents that run locally with lots of system privileges. So that means a compromised agent could execute commands or access files, and security firms have uncovered all kinds of vulnerabilities in it that expose data. Now, for me, and David, curious if you have anything to add here, but I think a lot about like shadow AI here. And so, Mariah, I want to ask you this too. And in your experience, like what happens when shadow AI or agentic AI, unsanctioned agentic AI is deployed? And like what kind of challenges do you see that usually emerge from that? Or what's your approach? What would you tell our audience about how to bring those things back under control? I know it's a multi-part question there, but roll with us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think shadow IT, this is shadow AI, right? And are you aware of what's going on in your environment in terms of whether you have a gateway monitoring the type of requests going out? You need to have an agent registry, right? And you need to have an inventory. It really starts there of deployed agents. You need to assign owners for that, business and security owners. You've got to set acceptable use boundaries, and then just assign risk to that, right? So it's back to 10 years ago. This is again nothing new, and I think we are very, very much behind. I think a lot of CISOs are really at the point. I talked to another CISO last month where developers are wanting to install a lot of MCP servers. They do a lot of build their own, and security has been stopping a lot of that activity until they have what they consider a solid, secure image to allow developers to do that. So I feel the security leaders right now is we're at the tip of the iceberg in terms of governance is there. Most environments have some AI councils, maybe a couple of policies. I think where we have to double down is now working with security architecture teams, which I believe is the only process we have right now to capture and block some of the risks that were going on. But we have to get people to the table. We have to get owners that want to use some of this productivity, reaching out to the security teams, and we have to have a quick process to approve or we don't want to be in the business of no. We're in the business of yes. Security is our enablers, figuring out how to do it in a way that doesn't over permission AI agents, where we need to understand governance gaps around non-human identity, which is really what this is all about. Most importantly, if you don't already know where your sensitive data lives and who has access to it, how it flows, AI will expose that weakness immediately. So if your data program is immature, AI will definitely magnify that risk.
Now, I want to go back to the story about OpenClaw for a second. As you know, OpenClaw created by a independent developer, Peter Steinberger, I think it was, David.
Yes.
It was released as like a free open source project. So we're seeing this contrast where you've got like the AI agents that can access autonomously across systems, and we're finding vulnerabilities in them. But the other side of that coin is it the technical flaws themselves? Or is it the speed at which things that are being adopted is what's the more important problem to solve? Like if you got to pick one to start with, is it how fast your organization adopts one of these new open source AI projects or any AI tool, or is it the fact that they're expected to have these inherent technical flaws that either you have to compensate for, or some researcher has to find and get the manufacturer to compensate for it?
I love that question. The speed worries me much more than the technical flaws. We've always had software vulnerabilities. That's not new. What's different with AI agents is that they combine both autonomy, system access, and decision authority. And I wanted to double down on what you said, Matt, earlier on. What's really scary is a lot of these AI agents, specifically what we see with OpenClaw, is that they're accessing almost anything they want. They're basically a non-human identity with super user admin privileges, but with also connectivity to the internet, where it's scanning and ingesting malicious backdoors and combining that with access to the internal environment. So it is a really bad and complex threat surface, but it's just another, at the end of the day, vulnerability we have to manage. My biggest concern that I'm seeing practically is the speed. I don't feel a lot of enterprises today have a fully baked out process to both technically process, people wise, get ahead of this in enough time. I think it really has to start with clean data inventories, access entitlement visibility, and making sure we have classification models. So we can't boil the ocean. We can't limit agents to everything. So if we know where they can access, what they can, what they can't. The other thing I really want to talk about is the research demonstrates that AI agents, when they're given a task with constraints, and the constraints block the objective, the agent generates reasoning around them. And it's not because it's malicious, it's because we optimize AI agents to achieve its goal. So that's the core shift. The systems are goal seeking. So if policy enforcement isn't technical and identity bound, which I'll talk about in a second, relying on instructions alone isn't government. So isn't governance. So they don't respect policy, they respect permission. So if your control is a sentence and a prompt instead of a boundary in identity and access management, I know we're going to talk about in a second, it's not a control. So my point is, you can give instructions to AI agents. So as an example, I read a story about an AI agent tool that was given scope to provide permissions or block access to system files. and the agent made its own decisions and gave access to those that weren't supposed to. And that's because the permissions weren't set explicitly enough for the agent. There is a way to manage them, but we have to know how specifically policy versus permissions.
Now, the next question I want to ask to both of you, but David, I'll have you start. Like, where do you actually think that the responsibility should sit between deploying a platform? Is it the organization themselves? Is it the individual users that are deploying the agents? Like, who's responsible?
Yeah, and I'd like to. We've gotten a couple of questions about recommendations, and can we not just kind of do the jazz hands? And yeah, I think it's probably worth kind of diving into both those things. What can we do there? I think from first of all, like when we're talking about Moltbook, we're talking about I think let's talk about OpenClaw a little first as kind of shadow AI. And when you're thinking about an organization, obviously there's some ways that you can figure out if people are going to different AI sites, right? If you're assuming you're backhauling through DNS, you can backhaul through, proxy or firewall. You can start to
Proxy
take
or
a look at where
firewall.
people are going, right? And that's not going to tell you necessarily what they're doing, but at least that they're going there, right? And then there's more granularity you can get to, I think, from that perspective inventorying some of the AI that people are going to. The sanctioned and the unsanctioned is obviously a good first step, as well as the underlying data resources that they're there and which ones they're touching that are sensitive, starting to get a handle on this. In terms of the responsibility, I think that it would be foolish for an organization to impede progress on AI altogether. It's kind of like saying in the 80s or 90s, we're not going to use computers. It's we have to kind of see that this is the vision, but we have to balance that friction between productivity and security, right? And whether this is evolving into a zero trust agentic architecture, which we're not there yet, where you're segregating. Okay, if I've got an unsanitized input, that agent can't go and execute a privileged action. So there's some deep thinking that I think needs to happen around how we're going to do this securely. But it does need to start with some of the visibility. And I think not only are organizations a little behind on the visibility with data, but they are now more behind than they might think in terms of understanding the AI tool sets as well.
Yeah, and I want to answer that as well. That was really good, David. I used to report into a former naval officer, and he talked about the difference between accountability and responsibility. So he gave the example. Let's say there's a Navy ship that crashes into some huge iceberg. Um, who's responsible? Is it the captain or is it the person that was, driving the ship, right? So the captain is accountable and the person driving the ship was responsible. So in terms of our environments, at the end of the day, the security team, the CISO is accountable that any AI platforms they bring in is secure and protects the business. Of course, vendors have responsibilities, and we need to make sure that we put pressure on them, we ask the right questions, and we have legal contracts that ensure that they are implementing maturity that we're expecting. I think the platforms have to secure the models. They have to provide transparency on how they're making decisions. But we have to implement the identity. So identity is probably the number one control that I would recommend is where to start, right? Giving every one of these AI agents a unique identity, specific least privilege permissions, and enabling logging. That is at the core of where to start.
Now, again, I'll pose this question to both of you, whichever one's more passionate to answer first, and then maybe I'll chime in. You've got a CISO in the hot seat. They've just called you. They are freaking out about the adoption of AI agents in their enterprise. What is the first control that you tell them to implement?
Yeah. Go ahead, David. Do you want to go? I've got an answer. I'll let you go.
So I was actually looking, I want to make sure somebody said, can we respond to the comments in the chat? I was hoping we were getting to most of those, but the first control that I would implement in terms of what was the end of that question, Matt?
Yeah, you got a CISO in the hot seat. Their agentic AI is taken off in their enterprise, and they've come
Yeah.
to you and they said, "What do I do first?"
That's a great question. I feel like the really, the biggest threat for most organizations is data leak, right? Data loss, and loss of function, certainly, of course. But I think back. Okay, let's go back to security fundamentals, the CIA triad. Where do we have the most risk around these different vectors? What is going to keep our business running? What are the existential threats that we have? And I think AI does have some new threats. And I loved one of the analogies in the chat earlier that it's data is water, AI is pressure. And I think, if the controls are the dams that are keeping our water in the right place, AI is just really increasing the pressure on the water behind the dam, and any little crack is going to start flowing water out much more quickly. So I think really, what are the critical assets that we have, and what is the control sets around them, and then what are the new ways that AI is going to disrupt the existing control sets, or bypass, or be invisible to those control sets. So that's where my instinct goes. Moriah, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, if I had to answer the question, the first control, besides inventory and knowing what you have, so as everyone knows, like the NIST pillar starts with knowing what you have. If you're only securing 70% of your agents and 30% are unrestricted, you're kind of ineffective. But the next one is identity and logging and understanding where your most sensitive data really exists. And these some of these like OpenClaw and the Moltbot agents are the equivalent of pen testing in terms of capability without human supervision. And we have to treat this access like privileged identity and force control. So I talked about identity and logging. We have to put hard access boundaries at the infrastructure layer. We have to restrict the what access the tools have, minimize the data exposure. So I talked about that earlier. The better you know where your data is, the more narrow and more custom and more effective applying restrictions are going to be. And then making sure that the permissions within the policy are set very explicitly is really the way to have a good foundation.
And I'll just add in, and I'll give a shout out to a really great paper from Forrester on this, which is like the key to agentic AI from a security perspective is understanding and governing its agency. So we often think of like an AI agent as like designed for a single purpose. Maybe it's a chat bot, maybe it helps with reservations, but the real question is, what else can it do, or what have you blocked it from doing? Because that agent is ultimately going to serve the within its within its guidelines, and it's going to serve the person that's interacting with it. And so if you don't limit its agency, like can it access the internet? Can it download and execute code from a third party source? Can it run an application? If you haven't stopped it from doing it, I wouldn't assume that it's doing that. You do know or can control and have limited what its agency is. And so, have like's been said, having an inventory, but also an understanding of the agency of every agent that you're building or leveraging would be a big step towards being able to limit the potential of a data breach or an incident or even a hallucination from a poorly created AI agent. Now, we've gotten a ton of comments in the chat. The chat is absolutely blowing up. And I know I want to cover a few things that have come in. So I'm just going to read some of the questions aloud, and either David or Moriah, feel free to chime in. A couple people have been talking about like allow lists and deny lists or blocking things at like a proxy or a gateway level. Anything you want to add there? Is that something that you've seen being successful?
Yeah, so I think absolutely. I mean, just like we had API gateways, AI gateways can do the same thing where it's reviewing outbound network traffic. It's got the egress logs, the proxy logs, the DNS logs, and you want to review that. And you want to be able to put structured patterns that are, basically with anything classified. You want to be able to restrict that and send an alert up to your SOC. So you also want to audit what's again the requests that are going in. I think we're still seeing, even with all the policies, employees still putting in a lot of some sensitive questions, even if it doesn't have specific sensitive data in the questions in the some of these GPT functions. You want to be able to monitor that. So I would definitely also, if you don't have a gateway yet, I would pull reports from Azure, Entra, Okta, again in terms of identity, seeing where service accounts and API tokens are going, and searching for things like bot or agent, AI, LLM, and seeing what kind of, where they're going, what they're doing. And again, takes me back to the API days, and we had to kind of do it manually. The same thing as cloud gateways, right? We had to have some false positives, and we had to took us about 6 months to get a good baseline, understand which users were doing what and what they weren't supposed to, and get things clean. It's a process.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, go ahead, David.
just one thing that we had, like the how do we safely deploy OpenClaw or one of these other agents. I think one of the things we're converging on here is that we need some kind of intelligence at the prompt layer. We need, agents are hard to scope down, right? Because they run differently every time you run them, even if it's the same prompt. They require usually a lot of access to do what they need to do, or at least a decent amount. And so it's hard to really determine if the agent is doing something for good or for evil unless you see what the prompt is and what's happening there. So this LLM gateway idea, this kind of contextual plane that you can get some observability at the prompt, I think is really going to be one of the big parts. You're going to have to scope down, you're going to have to monitor the data, but we're also going to need a layer to do some of that AI observability so you can safely, and you may not be able to safely deploy OpenClaw itself, but any agent, I think, is going to need some of these controls around it.
And we used to do it through billing. I remember when we were trying to find shadow IT and cloud usage, right? Actually, AWS does a great job in terms of its billing to identify the source, the user, the IP, and what kind of usage they're doing. And we found quite a lot of businesses that were sort of runaway situations. So that's another place to look at.
So thanks so much everybody for watching and for tuning in today. Let's give another special shout out to our guest on our newest segments,
Thank you.
Voices from the Front Lines.
Thanks for having This was a blast. Every Friday, right?
Yeah, well, we could aim for that. We certainly could. We certainly could. I think we've been doing about one a month right now, but if the appetite is there from our audience and maybe even from you, we could certainly think about increasing the frequency of the show. So thanks so much, everybody, for tuning in. Again, State of Cybercrime is made possible by you, our audience. We appreciate you so much for being here and sharing this with us. And for those of you that are listening at home, thank you too.
Thanks, everyone.